Hi, Belinda. How are you?
Hi, so good to see you, Kelly.
Oh, you too. Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening or watching today. So, I have my good friend Belinda Haan with me, and we're going to talk about self-compassion today. And Belinda is the perfect person to talk about this. She's a teacher and a coach and a facilitator. And Belinda works particularly in the motherhood life transition in that space, but she does lots of other interesting things as well. And recently, a year or two ago, she spent 12 months studying self compassion at Stanford. And I was thinking, wow, this is going to be really interesting. And then out of that came this amazing idea. And I'm just going to show you if you're watching, if you're listening, I'm actually showing it on the video, this emotional support self-compassion kit for mothers, which is the most beautiful, amazing, and thorough. It's so thorough. I couldn't believe how thorough it was. Um, Toolkit for mothers going through difficult days. And I guess it's probably aimed at new mothers, but I think it's for all mothers, really.
It is, it's for all mothers. And
Yeah.
really, I mean, it's even though it's in the context of motherhood, it has, universal practices in there for people
Yeah.
meeting difficult days.
Yeah. And so that was really a massive labor of love for you over some of the part, was it 12 or 18 months?
It was 2 years.
2 years.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, you know, what is self-compassion for you? Like, and I'm so curious, like, what made you go and study at Stanford?
Yeah, well,
That was a big year. It was a
it
big commitment.
was. It was a really big commitment. Yeah. So it's applied compassion training. So it was compassion inward and outward as well. And I had a couple of motivations for doing that program. And one of the big ones was that I was teaching self compassion
Mhm.
and it eluded me. And it just totally made sense. Self compassion, of course, treating yourself as you would a friend when you're
Mhm.
having a hard time is the simplest definition. And yet, when I had difficulty, self compassion was far, far away and an impossible dream, really. And
Mm.
so I was just trying to work out how to go from knowing that self compassion is a good idea and science supports that it's a good idea as well to
Yeah.
actually being able to embody it.
Yeah.
And so I thought having a year of compassion
Yeah.
with such amazing teachers that they have at Stanford, I thought this is my best chance. And so that was my personal reason for doing it.
Mm.
And then also, I'd run a lot of mothers groups up until then and could just hear the sort of shared experience of motherhood. And I really wanted every mother to be able to hear that their experience is normal and they're not doing anything wrong for not enjoying every moment and all of those shared experiences that we all have of the what I call the joy and the full catastrophe of
Mm.
motherhood.
Mm.
And I wanted something that they could have at their home and so
Yeah.
that they could support themselves when they're having a difficult day. And so that's why I came up with this idea of having a physical resource. And it was really important to me to have a physical resource and have it sort of designed in the way that it is, because I know, despite having years and decades of study around mindfulness and compassion and coaching psychology and all of that sort of thing, that in the moment of suffering and difficulty, we forget everything that we know. And I was so frustrated with myself, like, how
Yeah.
is that happening? And so I was starting to do a physical resource for myself. And so that's what came up because, as you know, like when we're having a really rough time, our brain often prefrontal cortex is offline. So our ability to be able to find the login to a course or find a page in the book that we were looking for is just beyond our what we can do. And so having something physical that, all the practices are 5 minutes and under and
Yeah.
they're all nervous system informed, it just helps us to be able to just quickly and easily support ourselves in those difficult times.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so needed. And yeah, I mean, it's always amazing to me. And I know. you know, like you and I, we've studied so much stuff. I know so many flipping embodiment practices that when I'm having a really crap time, I can't even think of anything to do, just like you said. And then
Yeah.
I think, oh, do that, you know. And you know, the more work I've done on my nervous system, the better I've been able to resource myself, is
Yes.
really what we're talking about.
Yes, exactly. And I studied mindfulness, and I've been interested in mindfulness for 20 years. And I found that in a way, the more insight that I was gathering, that totally made sense, all the wisdom, and meeting the moment with presence and all of that, it all made total sense. However, without compassion, self-compassion, and without the wisdom of the nervous system and having practices to resource ourselves, mindfulness just became another stick to beat myself
But it is, right?
up with. Yeah.
And you know, I think with a lot of, you know, meditation experience practices, for example, it just takes us further into our head.
Yes.
And so that's what has always drawn me to body-based work, because it takes me into the body. I spend so much
Yes.
time in my head. I know you do
Me
too.
too. Yeah.
And for me, it works.
Yes.
For me,
Yes.
that's the thing that works. And I think I've intuitively known that for many years. But it's so easy to be influenced by the culture that we live in and just, yeah, beat yourself up. The inner critic comes out, compare yourself
Yes.
to
Oh,
what you're seeing on
absolutely.
social media.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. Yeah, would you believe that my my self-critic is really, has been very, I think, award-winning at times. And even learning about self-compassion was just another thing to beat myself up, like, how can I not get this?
mm,
And if you do have that sort of that self-criticism, and you're not and you don't know about our need for slow and resourcing and things like that, like, that is the gap, I think, from knowing that self-compassion is a good idea, and that therefore potentially having self-criticism come in and judging yourself for not getting it, like,
yeah,
how wrong am I if I can't even get self-compassion?
yeah,
To the self-compassion being as simply as taking some breaths to calm our nervous system down, or doing some gentle touch to support ourselves from a resourcing perspective first. Like,
yeah.
to me, that is self-compassion in action. Like, I was under the impression that self-compassion was having really kind thoughts all the time. And, that's an advanced practice. Like, I've been doing this for years, and that's definitely not always true for me, that my thoughts can be the opposite of that. But I find that by using embodiment practices and resourcing practices, to me, that's like the first step in being able to be self-compassionate. Just like
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
gentle turning towards ourselves and going, wow, I feel so overwhelmed right now. I'm just going to just put everything down and go and have a cup of tea, or go for a walk, or, do something. That's self-compassion.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've talked to you about this many times. You know, it took me getting really sick and having cancer, because I have no problem being busy. It's
Yeah.
also my avoidance strategy sometimes to work. And so getting really sick and having to be very present to my emotional experience, and then real like, okay, I need to make a lot of changes, because I was very healthy. Like, on paper, I shouldn't have got, no doctor actually believed me when I went to them and said there's something wrong with me. Um, and I've been devotional in the last 3 years to slowing down
Mm.
and taking time, and it's been hard. And I feel like I'm actually in a space now where um, I could easily find work to do if I've got no clients. Be like, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that, because I have so many ideas.
Yes,
But
so
now,
creative.
then it's been really in the last 6 months where I've gone, yeah, I'm not doing that. I'm going to go for a swim. I'm going to go to the pool,
Mm.
or I'm just going to lay and read for a few hours, or have a nap, and it's almost like I was using to being self-compassionate, or um, being kind to myself in like a mechanical way.
Yes, yes, I've got to tick the box of
I've got to do
self-care.
that. I've got to do the self-care rather than actually just like listening to my body, going, actually,
Yes.
I'm really, and perimenopause is a brilliant guide for this, because it'll throw some physical roadblock in the way. No, actually, I need to rest. I need to rest.
Yes. Yes. And it's so countercultural, isn't it? Because,
Hmm.
everyone around us is so busy and, we're so busy ourselves, being mothers and running businesses and all of that kind of thing. It's such a rebellious act to say to yourself that I actually can say no, or I can be lazy today. Like that, it's so hard. What I'd be
Can say
interested, Kelly.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did it go for you? I mean, I know you had the absolutely life-altering event of cancer and you were forced into rest, but what was that journey like for you in terms of allowing rest and prioritizing rest?
Yeah. I mean, I think the treatments, chemo's hard. It's really hard. And, I think when animals are really sick, what do? They rest. So I was sort of like not able to do a lot of stuff and just had to rest a lot of the time because it was a long, sort of grueling um, treatment plan, I should say. And I knew that it would bring up a lot because I know about the nervous system. I'm a somatic coach. I'm nearly an SEP, nearly there. And I knew that it would really put a lot of stress on my nervous system and it would probably bring up a lot of emotional stuff. And I thought, I just have to marinate in whatever's coming up, right? The only way I'm going to get through this is to be with my emotional experience. A lot of fear, a lot of sadness, a lot of grief, a lot of distress, like physical distress,
Yes.
and pain. And so I did somatic experiencing therapy through it, which is really, really good for that. Um, yeah. And then I physically couldn't be anything other than slow. And the brain fog, like I know a lot of people get brain fog in postpartum period and perimenopause, but the brain fog is next level when you're going through treatment like that. So I literally couldn't even think about what I was doing tomorrow and couldn't remember what I did yesterday. And I got very good at using my diary and writing stuff. I used to hold a lot of stuff in my head, like just
Yes.
remember a lot of stuff. And so that was great because I got really good at my diary at putting reminders in for everything because I just didn't have any capacity at all for anything like that. So I developed a new skill of being much better with all of that stuff and managing my life, which has just freed up a whole lot of space in my brain, quite frankly, and made me less overstimulated, probably.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And
Mm.
just went really slowly. And then of course when you finish, the body takes quite a couple of years really to recover from it. So there's
Yes.
sort of a forced slowness. And of course, it's taken me a couple of years. And I think, it's now I'm postmenopausal. You're working with a different cocktail of hormones in your body. So you have different energy levels. And so it's taken me a few years to sort of be with like, okay, I was here and I could do this, but now I'm here. And that what does that feel like in my body? Because and I think you'll understand this when I explain this, my thing is like I feel really good. So I'm like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to the gym, then I'm gonna do this and do that. And
Yes.
then like the next day I'm like, oh God, I'm exhausted. I overdid it. So that's been like a transition period for me of like adjusting to my new hormonal cocktail, my body's changed, it's getting older. Like, how do I show some kindness to the new operating
Yes.
platform inside me, basically? And what is
I love
the
that
demand
because
of me?
you're getting upgrades, so the hardware needs support as well.
Hardware and the
An upgrade.
software need to be simpatico.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, as you know, these transitions happen over years as well. So it's just being a little patient with it. But
Yes.
it's also like the nervous system, the adjustments that have to happen in the nervous system that I actually feel have to feel safe to be slower.
Yes, it's so true. And this has been, I mean, this is one of my journeys on how to allow and feel safe enough to just rest and be. And, I'm getting a lot better at it than I used to. But, even I find, and I'm just about to go on holiday, so it's sort of reminding me that the first week or so of holidays, especially if we go away, I'm often really down, really
Mm,
down. And that's always been met with a fair degree of self-criticism, like, I mean, why am I down? I'm in Italy or whatever. It doesn't make sense.
yeah.
But it does make sense from a nervous system perspective, like to sort of be in the quiet, the stillness, to be in not doing and not achieving and not getting external validation and all of those things that maybe have provided some level of self-esteem, that you are just with yourself.
Mm,
That sounds like a fantasy for a lot of people, just to be on, obviously I'm with the family on holidays, but to be in that space where you're not doing can feel really unsafe to some
yeah.
people's nervous systems, including mine.
Yeah.
But like that stopping is like, oh gosh, what's going to happen is almost the feeling.
Well, and you can just keep repeating it, right? Like you can have this holiday where you're like going here and then we have 2 days here and then we're going here and then we're going here. And like you just like doing rather than kind of relaxing into it.
Yes, and if
And
you're a highly sensitive person, even positive change is hard.
yeah,
It can be hard, and
yeah.
especially if you've got other people's nervous systems in your very defined closed space that you're all pinging off each other. It can
Mm.
be really, really tricky. I find that first week of holidays is almost a write-off for me.
Well, it's also a transition period, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a bit of a liminal space and we are a little bit activated because we're in a new space, right? So our nervous system's like, where am I? Is this safe? Like what's going on? Um, and we're all jet lagged or maybe not, or
Yes.
it takes a few days to kind of settle in, to the new rhythm. Like if you go to Italy, they have a different rhythm, much
Yes.
slower. You know, food is center, family is center. It's just a different rhythm. I'm going to Bali this
Yes.
year. That's like much slower. So
Yes.
I
Yeah.
generally slide in okay there.
Yes,
So
I know. I do love Bali as well. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, these are all just examples of how we can, in the real world, be compassionate with ourselves. Like, even me knowing, okay, this is my process for the first week of holidays. This is what happens, generally
yeah,
speaking.
yeah.
And I can plan for that. And, even my family know, like, it's just a way of me and my family holding me in compassion
And
that,
and acceptance.
acceptance. Like, this is like, I really wish that this wasn't the case, and maybe one day I'll have so much nervous system health that that won't be the case. But
Yeah.
for the foreseeable future, it may be the case, and that's okay. It's not that I'm doing something wrong or I'm ungrateful or any of those things that maybe my inner critic might tell me is happening, and then I go,
Mm,
no, it's actually, I just find these transitions quite tricky, and I know what helps me.
mm,
And certainly allowing myself to be as I am is really helpful, instead of judging and resisting and all of that kind of thing.
yeah. Why do you think it's just from a cultural lens, why do you think it's so hard for us to be self-compassionate?
Well, I think that there's so many reasons why. And I think the nervous system has a part of that for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
I think if we've got a hypervigilance sort of for threat and things like that happening in our nervous system, it's very hard. Like if we're in self-criticism, then we can't access compassion,
Mm,
because compassion arises when we are not resisting what's
yeah,
present, and self-criticism is a form of resistance.
yeah,
It's a form of avoidance of whatever is happening. So self-compassion cannot arise and cannot be present if we're attacking ourselves and believing that,
yeah,
believing the propaganda.
yeah.
And I got this teaching from Robert Cusick, who's one of the Stanford directors and also my mentor, one of my mentors. And he sort of has this idea that one of the reasons why we can't be self-compassionate is because we haven't had the experience of receiving kindness.
Yeah,
For whatever reason,
yeah,
certainly not our fault, that
yeah.
we haven't been had the embodied experience of receiving kindness from when we were younger.
Mhm.
That could be a potential barrier, and I love that, because I think that is true. And I think that Kristen Neff um,
Oh,
talks
I love
about
her
self.
books. They're
Yeah,
so good.
she's got such amazing work, and one of the elements of self compassion that she talks about is kindness.
Mm,
And I have found that personally really difficult. So, and I realized that sort of receiving kindness is, can be hard for some people. Giving kindness, that's another story, but actually receiving kindness can be tricky, and,
yeah,
can even for some people feel like a threat
yeah,
to receive kindness.
yeah. Well, particularly if you've never had it before, like it's that kind of saying, from a nervous system perspective, we will be more comfortable with familiar chaos over unfamiliar safety.
Yes, yes. Yes, exactly.
So,
Yeah.
so to your point about not having received it ourselves that Robert Cusack makes, um, it's not actually role modeled a lot though. Like obviously, in some family systems, yes, but then I think of workplaces as well. Like it's not role modeled at all in a
No.
lot of workplaces.
No, it's not. No, no, that's right. That's right.
And if you think of like, we spend a lot of time with our family when we're younger. When we're teenagers, we start to pull away a little bit, and then we go off and we go to uni, and then we start working. And so we're not around our family system as much. Well, some people are, but some people aren't. So the predominant influence is the people in the workplace. And if you're not seeing any of it, like
Mm.
that's a very significant part of your adulthood and adult life where you're not having any of it reflected back to you.
No, and it's literally the opposite in a lot of ways.
It's
Like
the
it's a
complete opposite in many
dog
ways.
eat dog kind of situation where you've got to be a certain way in order to be, successful or whatever, which may, that extreme kind of way of being may not be our natural way of being.
Yeah.
And so there's just so much disconnect that can happen. I know we've talked at length about this. But yeah, so,
Yeah.
and I think that also, there's a few other things that are blockers, I think, to self-compassion. And, the most obvious one is that we don't realize we're suffering, or we don't realize we're having a hard time because we're too busy, or we subtly self-gaslight ourselves, by saying, oh, well, my problem's not as bad as this person's problem or whatever.
Mm,
And so compassion can only arise if we acknowledge that we're having a hard time.
yeah.
So, like, I think that's one thing that I think a lot of us, including myself, miss. We just keep getting on with things,
Yeah.
and we don't realize that we're actually having a bit of a rough time. And this has probably been the number one thing that I've realized is a blocker, that has been a blocker for me, other than the nervous system stuff, for self compassion. And Chris Germer, I'll see if I can find his quote, but we use self compassion practices to fix our experience and ourselves. rather than using self-compassion because we're suffering. And I'll see if I can find his
Well, it's
quote.
that whole thing though, like thinking that we're broken.
Exactly.
We're
So
not
it's
broken. We're just,
self-compassion to plaster over how broken we feel. Like that it's actually him and Kristen Neff say, when we struggle, we give ourselves compassion, not to feel better, but because we feel bad.
mm,
And I just think that just nails it, because the motivation behind it is a care for the fact that we're having a hard time, as opposed to a need to fix ourselves. That I think that motivation is so subtle, the difference, but it really makes a big difference.
it is subtle. It is subtle. Yeah. And there's, you know, there's, I was thinking about this week because the Met Gala was on in New York, and the frocks are amazing, and from an artistic perspective, it's good to look at them. But they're also kind of, the cultural impact is quite toxic in terms of the behavior that's then espoused in society, because it does influence us culturally, and particularly women in particular are so hard on ourselves. We're just so hard on ourselves, and we get in our own way.
Yes.
And I think guys too, I shouldn't exclude them. I think
Yes.
they have all these demands and expectations placed on them, and a
Yeah.
lot of them have to show up in a way that is just not them at all.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, and
but yeah,
it's a hard time, in a way for us all on multiple fronts, but just to pull the thread of like social media, for example, and that comparison and feeling like we're not doing enough, not being enough or whatever. Like the idea, like when you and I were growing up, we only had to compare ourselves to the however many girls were in the class.
yes,
Now we have to compare ourselves to the world,
the
including
planet.
celebrities and like models and all of that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So it's no wonder that I really feel like it would be natural for our unworthiness to just be going up and up and up all of the time,
yeah,
because we've got an unlimited number of comparison points of where we're not doing enough, or where we're not pretty enough, or not, meeting the expectations of society in some way.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's so many, so many points, and so many, particularly I think when you're younger and you don't know yourself as well. But even like I've just noticed that in this sort of perimenopause, menopause conversation of, there's so much confusion, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing this. And it's just like, because it is so complex, and there's so many aspects to the transition, both physical and existential, but mostly the physical stuff's talked about. And it's no wonder women just are going out of their minds when all they need is actually to slow down and be compassionate towards themselves
Yes.
and listen to their bodies a little bit.
Yes.
Because she will guide you. She'll show you where to
Yes.
go. And like I was listening to this podcast yesterday with a naturopath, and it was Anne-Marie McQueen's podcast. She runs Hot Flashing. She's a journalist. And they were talking about, diet, which is so important, but the hormonal stuff. And as Anne-Marie said, if you listen to every doctor on Instagram, you'd think if you don't take estrogen, your brains would fall out. And I just cracked up laughing. But there's just so much information out there. And I thought, no wonder women just beat themselves up, because it is
Yes.
so complex. There is no, like, parenthood, motherhood, menopause, there's no one way of doing it.
No. No,
Got
there
to
is
do
no
what's
one way.
most authentic to you. But when you've got social media, magazines, popular culture screaming in your face all the time, this is the way to do this, do that.
Yeah.
It's no wonder people fall in a big heap.
Yes. Yes. And then all the judgments that happen, the self-judgments about falling in the heap. Like the existential questions come up. Gosh, they're hard to look at, and then if we can stay with that just a little bit, and just a little bit feel into what's emerging for us, and quite often it's best to do that in the company of a another who knows how to hold space very well and can honor the nervous system. But if we can just stay a little bit with that, we can uncover some really beautiful treasures and really be able to come into closer alignment with our authentic self. That's, that's who we truly are, outside of the conditioned ways that we either believe ourselves, the stories we've believed over a lifetime, or what society tells us that we should be, and all of that. Like that, I think there's not a lot of societal narrative around that liminal space, and because it's painful. I mean,
Really painful.
really, really, really painful. And, it is so humbling. And yet, in that cave, we find the buried treasure.
Always.
And it's
Always.
like,
But sometimes we don't know how to, and I think, again, bring it back to self-compassion. Like, you don't see the warning lights, or you don't see the flashlight, or whatever it is, because you're beating yourself up for not being however you need to be. And it sort of strikes me that through these big rites of passage is when you need self-compassion the most.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. And it is just such a practice, and it's a non-linear journey. Like, I am constantly humbled by my lack of self-compassion sometimes, because there's always something new. There's always something that we haven't experienced before, or we're having a deeper experience of it. And I mean, motherhood and parenthood, I mean, there's just triggers left, right, and center to sort of look at and be with. But, my mantra is just, I allow myself to be as I am. I allow myself to be as I am, because I also feel sometimes like I've got a PhD in resistance. Which I think, this is why I've created this toolkit. It's from such an embodied experience of how hard these things can be, learning about it and being a teacher in it, and then the difference between knowing and doing, and that sort of embodied experience.
I guess we all teach what we need to learn.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, this toolkit is equally for me as it is for others.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. Like, it's just when I opened it, I was like, holy, there's so much information in here. And I knew you would be so thorough. I knew you would leave no stone unturned, which is really good, because your brain works exactly the same way as mine. It's so systemic, like, oh, and if this happens, what about this? And then if this happens, what about this? And then, oh, whatever. Yeah.
Yes, having that sort of wide tendrils of vision.
Yeah.
And then being able to sort of hopefully, bring it down to a level that's like you're totally overwhelmed, and here's something quick you can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, it's brilliant. And yeah, it just gives you something to go to when you're really, really, really struggling. And it doesn't have to be, I'm thinking with a lot of embodiment practices in particular, they don't have to be really sophisticated.
No. And actually, I literally had a post-it note saying simple is valuable. Because I have a strong need to overcomplicate things sometimes, because I have got that intellectual love learning, love to, really understand things at all levels kind of thing. But our nervous system really needs simple. It needs
simple and slow.
Simple and slow, and just, gentle, and, and the practices basically are resourcing practices, fundamentally. And then they also just get us to have a little bit of a turning towards what's happening in that moment, with a very compassionate kind of normalizing. I mean, one of the core kind of aspects that I've really brought into the toolkit, that's a part of self-compassion, is common humanity. And realizing, because when we're having difficult moments, we believe firstly that it's going to last forever, and it's personal to us.
Yeah.
and that everyone else has got their life sorted except for us.
Yeah.
And that sort of shared humanity is so embodied throughout the toolkit to remind us that this is part of being human, and this is part of motherhood. You're not doing
Yes.
anything wrong for, for experiencing anger. That there's nothing, it's like, if you're not experiencing anger in motherhood at different times, then that's a problem.
But also,
Not
I think, all emotions are valued, right?
Yes.
Valuable, and they're all valid, and they're part of keeping us alive,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
so, you know, a lot of us don't have a good relationship with anger because we had to repress it when we were younger just to be
Yeah.
able to survive. And it comes up in motherhood, and you think, gosh, like, why am I so angry? Well, because you're exhausted and,
Yes.
you're constantly pushing over your own boundaries all the time, and
Yes.
you're sort of functioning on a gas tank that's got not much in it.
Yeah.
And then again, then when you go through perimenopause, anger can come up big time. But as I say to everyone, well, because you got to reclaim your relationship with it. So
Yes.
learn to love it so you can, then transition into your next phase, which is your wise woman self, because she needs to be able to get angry about stuff to drive change, right? We're moving into a different
Yes.
phase.
Yes.
Um, and so anger then becomes a force, a fuel for passion.
Yes.
And this is a passion project, yours. It is a force for change, this project.
Yes. Yeah. It has been just such a beautiful experience, creative experience to go through. And as I said to you before we press record, it's the work has demanded me embodying it.
Yeah.
So and
So
anger,
how did
like,
you do that? How did you do it for you?
well, I had to look at my own stuff,
Yeah.
because, and my own relationship to difficult emotions. And, anger as an example, I found so difficult to do that tab. And I was curiously watching myself, like, what's happening here?
Yeah.
Because I had my own shame about anger being present, because
Yeah.
I was very identified with the very nice,
Yeah.
lovely person, that was my identity that I was fused with. And so anger doesn't belong to someone who's nice. That was my narrative that I had, when, like, that was anger was just waiting for me to embody it so that I could own my own power and to be
Yes.
my authentic self and to be able to hold stronger boundaries and, things like that that was missing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think because we have this really confused understanding. Well, first to be able to hold the energy of it in your nervous system, right, is one thing, and it
Yes.
helps you reinforce your boundaries. But we all think anger is just like we're losing our bananas, basically.
Yes.
But it can be as simple as like back off, right?
Yes.
Just in
Yes.
that sort of commanding voice. It doesn't have to be crazy because
Yes.
it's there for boundary violations.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
It's what
Yes.
it's there for. It's a protective response, and we need it so desperately. But
Yes.
also, like I said, it's a force for passion.
It is.
So I just
Yes.
take, particularly the stuff that pisses me off, that's sort of at a societal level. I'm like, right, well, how can I contribute to the solution here? And what
Yes.
can I do? So, I try and use it from a passion perspective.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, on a day-to-day level, it's just a total boundary enforcer.
Yes. And it's funny because one of the practices in anger is passion fueled action. That
Yeah.
that can be a real messenger. Anger can be a real messenger about what what means a lot to us, or what needs are not being met, or there's a real potential for force for good
Yeah.
there, that can really help us to reorient to what matters to us.
Yeah. It surely, surely does. Yeah, so all emotions, I think, they're so valuable, and so part of our transitions, particularly midlife, is it will show us where we need to go and what we need to reclaim, and
Yes.
motherhood does that as well, but
Yes.
it's different to a different degree.
Yes. Yeah. It's to me, it's all are showing us how we need to come back home. You
Yeah.
know, ultimately coming back home to our true self that, you know, is already perfect and whole, but we've got all of these
Adaptive
coverings.
strategies. Yeah, all the
Yeah.
adaptive strategies
Yeah.
in place that are masking our authentic self, which makes sense because, you know, when you're a child, you have to fit in to function and receive the sort of love, support, and encouragement that you need. And so our nervous system will choose adaptation over authenticity every time.
Yes.
But, you know,
Yes.
there's you know, the early stage of adulthood, which is very driven by ego, and then moving into, in our second half of life, a more soul driven life. And so that's why a lot of people, when they hit their 40s and 50s, are like, I want more meaning, I want more purpose, I want, you know, something different.
Yes.
This is not enough. I want more. And that's what more is for you to just be yourself, your most authentic self.
Exactly. Absolutely. It's
And
so true.
the longing is what we are longing for.
We are who we're searching for. We
We are,
really are.
yeah.
And you know, the things that arise that are hard are the barriers to being able to experience ourselves in that way. So from that perspective, they're little messengers, but of course I know the lived experience that sometimes you're like, I don't want this. This is too hard.
I know, I know. And I'm just thinking, I was reflecting on this yesterday, like our brain is such a, you know, thinking about your inner critic that you talk about, our brain, it's amazing how our brain and our strategies are such protective responses. Like our
Yes.
brain is such a bastard sometimes, isn't it? Like
Well, it's operating off old news.
it's operating off old news all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, a present an old story is coming up in the present moment, but it
Yes.
just never ceases to amaze me how yeah, it just gets in there.
Yeah. I mean, being human is bloody hard.
It
You know,
is
like
hard.
it is, you know, full of beauty and joy and awe. And we know that, like, we all have experiences like that. And it's also got a lot of things that are really tough as well. And, you know, our biological hardware or software or whatever is, you know, it works against us sometimes. And we, you know, we need practices to be able to support ourselves, to be able to feel more love for ourselves and to feel more open to life and to feel more aliveness and that sort of thing. And that's our journey back home.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. In where we, you know, it's not stuff we're taught as kids. Well, so I guess they're getting better at teaching kids this now, but none of us who grew up in the 70s, 80s,
Yeah.
90s, 60s, we didn't learn any of this stuff at school.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
We
think
didn't,
that for
our
the
parents didn't learn
yeah,
it.
yeah, the vast majority of us had a family upbringing, not not saying this is our parents' fault at all, but I mean, how lucky are our kids to have emotional coaches that we are doing with them? Like there was no one coaching us about difficult emotions and self-compassion and all of that. So for a lot of us, you know, if we're big feeling people, we experienced a lot of emotions as children and we had to navigate that on our own.
Mm.
And so that's where self-criticism and things like and shame are born because we don't have
We didn't
any
have the
light.
co-regulation.
We didn't have co-regulation. We didn't have the conceptual understanding that this is normal.
Yeah, we didn't have the conceptual understanding. We didn't have the co-regulation we needed to help us navigate it. And
Yeah.
our little systems weren't mature enough
Yeah.
to be able to process it and work out what was going on. And I
Yeah.
think also a lot of us, um, you know, once you hit teenagehood, you're kind of on your own, you know,
Yeah.
navigating the world. And I know, like, we always laugh about growing up in the 70s and 80s, and it's like, you know, you just kind of were out doing your own thing and you'd rock up at dinner time and
Yeah.
then you would have dinner and everything would be fine. And I, you know, I had a very loving, sort of supportive childhood, but, you know, did a lot of stuff on my own as a teenager and then left home when I was 17 to come down here to go to university. And look at my eldest child who's about to turn 18 and think, oh my God, how did I do that?
Yes, I know.
Literally, how did I do that?
I know. Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And, when I'm with the kids and they're having their own emotional situation, and I'm like holding space for them, and, not always, by the way, but, holding space for them and validating them and allowing them to be seen. And I mean, how different is their journey going to be compared to, like, to be seen and to be known and to matter? Like, that's what we all really want. And, that often has been missing from our life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
And
so
we
we've
don't,
got to find that for ourselves. That's what I'm realizing.
we do. We have to give so much of it to ourselves. Yeah. And it's just hard. I mean, I think it's even hard, like, to just stop and do nothing. I was talking to someone very close to me yesterday who was made redundant last week, and I said to them, I said, oh, what have you been doing? And they said, oh God, I've just been resting, and oh, it's so good, and my life's been so busy for so long. That they have teenagers as well, and I'm in no hurry to do anything at the moment. And I said, yeah, sometimes these things are a blessing, aren't they? And they said, yeah, really. And it's just,
Yes.
I think that's what's hard for a lot of people, um, is life is so busy now, and it is like rubbing against a cheese grater a lot of the time. And so
Yes.
how can you show yourself some kindness when your body is just on the go all the time?
Yes. Yes. And I don't know about you, but honestly, everyone that I speak to are giving a different story of burnout.
Yes.
Like it's serious.
Do you know what? Like, in my new devotion to slowness and not doing as much, like recently I've noticed, probably in the last 12 months, I see people, walking around. I walk everywhere in Melbourne. I don't drive that much. I try and do my 10,000 steps a day, but I see lots of people out and about, and they're, how are you? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just bumping along.
Yeah.
Like, life's not too hectic. I'm just doing my thing, working a bit, doing a bit of exercise, reading, just kind of. And people like look at me like, oh, wow. But what I've come to realize, after years of studying the nervous system, practicing it, is actually like, when your nervous system's in a pretty good place and life's kind of okay, life is full of many moments. It's not that exciting. It's full of many moments of just kind of contentedness and bumping
Yes.
along. And I like it.
Yes, yes, yes. And I think that there require, to be able to like it requires, I think that's an indication of how much work you've done on yourself. Just to be able to enjoy that stillness and that beingness.
Yeah.
It requires a lot of nervous system health and safety and self-love,
Yeah.
to be able to say, oh, it's actually okay for me to not be understood by someone who can't understand why I'm okay with not being busy.
I
And while that's,
know. Well, like,
yeah,
even my podcast, for example, like this year, I've sort of started off with a couple, and then I thought, actually, I'm going to take a bit of a rest from it. Like, I couldn't even tell you why I didn't. And someone asked me recently, like, what's going on with your podcast? You haven't really done much this year. And I said, ah, I'm just not feeling it at the moment. Like, I just, I've sort of lined up a few speakers and
yeah,
things haven't worked out, but I don't care. But I'm just kind of just going to go with it this year. I don't think I'm going to have the last couple of years I've tried to do one about every 3 weeks. And this year I'm sort of like, I'm just going to go with the flow on it. I'm not really going to commit to something like that. I feel like my
yes,
work's changing its direction a little bit. I don't really know what that looks like. I don't really care. Like,
I
I'm
love
just kind of
that.
going with it, being a little bit organic and not really being in too much of a rush about it,
Yes.
and just see what comes my way. And I
Well, it's
do,
trusting,
it's
really
it's
trusting.
trusting that everything will work out. Usually does. I wouldn't have been like this 5 years ago. I would have been in a flat panic. Um, and I think part of it, part of it is, yes, or I have done a whole lot of work on myself, but part of it is also like my kind of postmenopausal wise woman. Do you know? I'm
Yes.
like, you know what? Like, kind of stuff works out.
Yes, I love that. Yes, I think that isn't that just such a gift of this perimenopausal the journey can be arduous. Like
It is
really,
arduous.
really, really arduous.
Yeah.
And the treasure or gold, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is that embodiment of what do I want to do?
Yeah, but also like who's like, I don't have to do it. Like
Yeah.
someone said to me, but you have to do it. I'm like, but why? Why do I have to do it?
Yes.
I don't have to. I can stop and shift if I want to. I'm not going to
Love that.
burn myself out again, and you know, actually I can stop it.
Yes. Yes, it's okay. The world is not going to end. And I find myself like when I'm really rushing and really busy and everything like that, that is a signal to me that I'm disconnected.
Yeah.
That's very habitual patterning just playing out right there because everything seems so urgent and so necessary. And
Uh-huh.
that's what my nervous system is saying. It is urgent and necessary. And it's just a radical act for me to say, no, I'm not going to
Well,
do that.
it's your old wiring, right? It's your
Yeah.
old patterns just
Yeah.
kind of playing out in the moment, and you kind of have to boss them around saying, no, we're
Yeah.
not doing this anymore.
Yeah. 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 Yes.
I think
Yes.
I think that probably is a good place to finish. What do you think?
Yeah. Sounds so good. I feel so calm just from being in your presence. Excellent co-regulation.
Yeah. Oh
It's
dear. Well,
been so
thanks.
lovely. I just, you and I think, didn't we one day have a 3 hour Zoom call once?
Yeah,
We do have always so much to talk about, don't
we
we?
do have a lot to talk about all the time. There are
Yeah.
many of the world's crises to solve, but
Yes.
it's good just to talk about this, and also, you know, to be kind of real about our own experience, um and open and honest about it, because I think not a lot of people are really open
Mm.
about what, we try and put on that glossy front.
Yes. And I've experienced that from many teachers, and I find it's so much more helpful when people are saying, yeah, but this stuff's hard. Like I've been doing it for 2 decades and I still find it hard sometimes because, it is a non-linear path and it's a practice all the time.
All the time. And yeah, and as to your earlier point, like we just need the support of each other. Like community is the way through. Like healing happens in community, but also we're not meant to do life on our own.
Yes. Yes.
We're meant to be supporting each other. We're meant to be helping each other. That's kind of how we're, our mammalian wiring. And yet so much of
Yeah.
how we live our life is on our own.
It's
And I
not
think
set
that's
up
part
for
of the
that.
challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
So with the toolkit, like what's the website for that? Can you remind me of what that is
Yeah.
again? And I'll put it in the notes.
The
Yeah.
compassionproject.au.
Just showing it again. Compassion Project. And you've got your Insta page, which
Yeah.
is, what is that?
I think
Compassion.
it's at thecompassionproject.au.
Yeah, beautiful. So if you want to buy the cards, you just jump on the website, or you can go to Instagram. There's a link and it'll take you through to the page. And like I said, I think they're good for it. I mean, they're not just for mothers. I think for fathers and for
Yeah.
anyone really. It doesn't matter what your gender orientation is. It's just such a good toolkit, and it's so easy to use, and it's just got so many ideas. Because when we are feeling really rubbish, it's hard to think of things to do.
It is, yeah. And one of the surprising things that's happened is I've just heard so many mothers tell me that their children are picking it up saying, could we do a practice together? And that just makes
Oh,
me feel so happy to just hear that that's being initiated by the child. Isn't that just beautiful?
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you so much.